Imagine a secondary road isolated far from the lights of the Argentine city of Gualeguaychú. It's early morning, the air is heavy, it's that kind of silence that makes you feel like something bad is about to happen. Then a police car arrives, it slows down, those strong headlights light up the darkness. There are no houses around, no people screaming for help, just the emptiness of the night, the emptiness. In response, the detective gets out of the car with cautious movements, as if he already knew that being in a hurry there wouldn't help at all. The ground still shows fresh marks, a trail that stops. Suddenly, a motorcycle is lying on its side, and a few meters away, a body is stretched out on the asphalt motionless, in a way that doesn't match someone so young. So the officer approaches slowly, not because he's in no hurry, but because he already has experience. It's too much to know that simple scenes often hide complex layers. There are no signs of robbery there. Nothing was taken. It doesn't look like a random ambush. No signs of struggle. And above all, this doesn't seem like the crime of a stranger. Whoever did this probably knew the victim, the path the victim was taking, the exact time, even the shortcuts the person might take. While the forensic team starts working, a question hangs in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. What would you do if the young man stopped here, in the middle of nowhere? Hours later, a name comes up as the most obvious answer in the case. Maybe a name that no one finds strange to mention, but it's still too soon to point to as guilty. At the police station, a beautiful, intelligent young woman appears, the daughter of a police officer. She is crying, saying that she is in shock that she loved the young man and that she doesn't know anything. At first glance, everything fits, at least on the surface. But the detective doesn't let himself be swayed by superficial emotions. Let's say he looks for patterns, and soon he realizes that this story goes far beyond a simple gunshot. It's about dominance, narratives that change, or some silence imposed by fear about how far someone can go to avoid losing power. The body on the road is just the end of a plot that started long before. Not in the crime itself, but in the lives of the people involved. And to understand how a teenage relationship ended in a life sentence, we need to go back to the beginning. The origins of those who were on the street. Marcos Campos, welcome everyone here. Every week there are at least 3 new episodes. If you like to hear real stories, subscribe and turn on your notifications. If you can become a member, it helps me a lot. Leave a like or comment, even just an emoji. And let's get to the facts. Before any weapon entered the story, before official versions or discussions about blame, there was only a young man lying on the cold asphalt, and that's where investigations often fail, by ignoring who the victim was before becoming just a number in a report. His name was Fernando Gabriel Pastorizo. He was 20 years old, and until that night no one saw him as someone prone to trouble. He was the son of Silvia Mantegassa and Gustavo Pastorizo. Fernando grew up in a family that, even after his parents' divorce when he was very young, kept strong ties. There were no legal battles or estrangements. Father and mother were always present, and he and his sister Carla were raised with love and stability. Fernando was one of those boys who won people over without much effort. He was outgoing, polite, affectionate, made friends easily. He was close to his family and always willing to help people. They remember him as someone who didn't deserve this. His record was clean. No serious fights, no run-ins with the police, no bad reputation. Quite the opposite, I would say. He was seen as calm, maybe even too naive for certain realities. And it was exactly that naivety that may have left him vulnerable to someone with evil in their heart. As they reconstructed his life, the investigators found a turning point. At 15 years old in school, he got involved for the first time with a girl who attracted attention wherever she went. Very beautiful, popular, confident, her name was Nahir Mariana Galarza. For Fernando, that was his first true love, something that went beyond just dating. He felt lucky to be with someone so admired, but for Nahir, the definition changed depending on the context. At times they were a couple, but at other times they weren't. Nothing. It depended on who was watching, who was listening, and what benefit that answer could bring. Fernando was completely in love, but Nahir seemed comfortable with a kind of power imbalance. She didn't completely hide the relationship, but she didn't fully respect his story either. She invited other guys to her house, openly flirted, got involved without hesitation, let's say, and Fernando ended up accepting it. Not because he agreed with it, but because he couldn't stay away from her. Over time, the relationship turned into an exhausting cycle. Frequent fights, breakups that didn't last long, reconciliations displayed on social media with happy photos and inspirational quotes. On the outside, it seemed like harmony in a way, but on the inside, it was just dissonance, constant tension. When Fernando started to notice how much it was hurting him, he tried to react by going out with other girls. That's when things escalated because Nahir couldn't tolerate that loss of control. Actually, it wasn't about losing the boy. She demanded access to his phone every day, reading messages, checking conversations, questioning names and times. It wasn't that simple jealousy, you know. It was really obsessive surveillance. Still, the relationship went on. In the eyes of Nahir's family, Fernando was a positive influence. When he was introduced to her parents, Marcelo Galarza, a police officer, and also Yamina Crow, a former police officer, he was very well received. They saw him as a boy from a good family, capable of calming their daughter's rebelliousness. On the outside, everything pointed to a serious relationship. In 2016, they traveled on vacation through Brazil, even with Nahir's family, and the photos showed laughter, a very good and healthy relationship. But the investigation later revealed that the crises already existed, they persisted, even there, fights, betrayals, breakups, and reconciliations. In 2017, things got even worse, because Nahir started law school at the University of Concepción del Uruguay, where Nahir ended up getting involved with others, including a professor. And also boys she would walk hand in hand with, even in the hallways. According to Costa, Fernando knew about it, he felt the impact of it, and he suffered a lot, exhausted. So he started talking about really breaking up, about escaping that cycle. Every time he threatened to leave, Nahir would react, cry a lot, threaten to hurt herself, and make Fernando feel guilty. And when that stopped working, she changed her tactics, saying she would spread rumors that he abused her. Something completely harmful, especially coming from the daughter of a police officer. The bruises that Nahir showed actually came from hockey games, not from abuse. Fernando never reported it, never defended himself publicly until Christmas 2017, when, at a nightclub, he saw her kissing another guy. Shocked, he tried to talk, but one of her friends, Sol Martinez, influenced by lies about him being the girl's abuser, slapped Fernando in the face. Fernando didn't fight back. He cried there, silently, in his own silence, swore he would never hit a woman, and he just left. Later, however, Nahir and Sasol showed up at his house saying they wanted to talk. They took him to Nahir's house, which was empty, and attacked him there. He recorded part of it but was forced to delete it. Hurt and humiliated, he sent messages to friends about the pain, about everything that was happening. He also told one of Nahir's aunts everything that was happening, but he didn't get any help. Friends suggested that he move to another city and study business administration. He actually enrolled in December 2017 and classes started in March 2018. For the first time, Fernando seemed finally determined to move on, to leave all that filth behind, so to speak. But investigators concluded that when he decided to do that, to leave his girlfriend's life for good, that's when the links in this criminal chain started to close in. For an experienced investigator, the most serious crimes rarely come out of nowhere, right? At the exact moment of the shot, for example, it is built. The links close over time and often the breaking point. It happens when someone realizes that the control they had over the other person is slipping through their fingers for good. In the days leading up to the death of Fernando Pastorizo, the police reconstructed every call, every message exchanged, every detail and movement. What emerged was not an isolated fight or a sudden impulse, but exactly a pattern of increasing insistence, a more and more desperate attempt to keep things as they were. In short, to put it simply, the girl kind of felt a big T for everything she did with the guy. Everything started to intensify on December 28, 2017. Fernando and Nahir exchanged several messages. She was trying once again to win the guy back, to rekindle the relationship or whatever it was that she felt, right? These weren't polite requests or simple talks, okay? It was real emotional pressure. Fernando, however, in this situation, responded differently than usual. When he usually ended up giving in, this time he said he didn't want to. He said that she mistreated him too much, that he didn't want to continue like that anymore. That not even if they offered him $1 million would he get back with her. For those who knew his history, that was something new. Fernando was firm, determined, really, for the first time in years, he wasn't going to back down. The next day then, December 29th, Nahir decided to take action herself. She went to Fernando's house. There was no public scene, no shouting in the street. Fernando received her politely as he always did, even after everything he had already been through at her hands. They talked calmly and his answer remained the same. The relationship was over for good. Faced with that final refusal, Nahir made a request that might have seemed simple and harmless to someone who didn't know him, right? She asked him to take her home on his motorcycle. Fernando ended up agreeing, so they went out together into the night. When they arrived at her house, Nahir didn't get off right away. Instead, she suggested something more intimate. She said that after 5 years together, it would be fair for them to have one last night, a farewell. Fernando didn't realize it was a siren song and ended up falling for it. He ended up giving in to that invitation. After their encounter there, when it was time to leave, Nahir changed the plan again. Now she wanted him to take her to her grandmother's house. Fernando agreed once again. When they were about to leave, she said she had forgotten something inside the house. She went in alone and came back quickly. And investigators later understood that that brief moment was crucial. Because that was when she took an object, and put it in her pocket. So, without noticing anything, Fernando started the motorcycle there. Both of them got on and went in there. In the early morning, little traffic, little light, in a stretch already far from the more urban road. Nahir asked him to stop. Fernando obeyed, got off the motorcycle. Then she took a 9mm pistol out of her pocket, her father's professional weapon since he was a police officer. As we saw, Fernando didn't even have time to react. The first shot hit him in the back. He fell off the motorcycle, still alive, confused, trying to understand what was happening. There was no conversation, no explanation. Nahir simply approached and fired again, this time point blank in the chest. After 2 shots, she bent down, picked up the shells from the ground and left on foot, leaving the body there. Minutes later, a taxi driver passed by that spot. Actually, he saw a figure in the distance, thought it was a fall, a motorcycle accident, nothing serious, and he simply kept going. When he returned along the same route, he saw the young man still lying there. Now, he finally realized that something wasn't right. So, he stopped, got closer, and realized that Fernando was still breathing, and he called emergency services immediately. The ambulance arrived, but when it did, it was already too late. Fernando was lifeless, and meanwhile, in another part of the city, Nahir was arriving at her house. She put the gun back exactly where she took it from, took a shower, and went to sleep, as if the night had simply just ended. When the police arrived at the crime scene, the first conclusion was very clear. It wasn't a robbery. All of Fernando's belongings were there with him. Wallet, cell phone, even his motorcycle. It was truly a deliberate homicide. Even before hearing the official news, Fernando's mother, Sylvia, called Nahir to ask about her son, who hadn't come home, and it was already late. She asked if she knew anything, and Nahir coldly replied that she didn't know anything, that she had last seen Fernando around 11 p.m. So hours later, Sylvia received confirmation of her son's death. Desperate, she called Nahir again, and this time, the young woman seemed shocked and shaken by the news. Shortly after, Nahir posted a farewell message on social media, saying she would love Fernando forever. At the police station, she was initially questioned as a witness. She cried and said that Fernando was a very good person, that he had no enemies and that he didn't deserve to die that way. But as the conversation went on, something started to catch the investigators' attention. The initial grief gave way to a different attitude. Nahir started to raise hypotheses, to point out possible culprits, to build alternative scenarios. You know all that? Even before she was formally considered a suspect. For the police, that behavior was not common for someone who had just lost a loved one. Her name was removed from the list of witnesses then, and she became a person of interest. And when Nahir's father, Marcelo, realized the direction the investigation was taking, he acted. Actually, he made a decision very quickly. He hired a lawyer for his daughter. From that moment on, the story started to change, and it changed drastically, okay? For any investigator who has dealt with complicated cases, few things are as revealing as a story that changes too quickly. In the beginning, Nahir Galarza appeared to be in a state of deep shock, crying desperately, using rehearsed phrases about lost love, pain, and justice. It seemed too rehearsed, you know? But it still fit, let's say, the profile of someone who had just really lost a loved one to a tragedy. As days turned into weeks, however, the story started to bend, crack, and rebuild itself in ways that didn't hold up. Guided by the lawyer, hired by her father right after the police started focusing on her, Nahir completely changed her story. Suddenly, there was no longer any relationship with Fernando. Now, they were just acquaintances, not boyfriend and girlfriend. There was no real emotional bond between them, no closeness. According to this new version, it was something casual, sporadic, just a no-strings-attached meeting, you know? In other words, it was clearly, let's say, the defense's strategy to make sure there was no bond there. After all, who kills someone they have a romantic bond with, right? This twist, let's say, fell apart almost immediately. The police gathered statements from mutual friends, family members from both sides, schoolmates, and university colleagues. Everyone confirmed the same thing, the exact same thing. Fernando and Nahir were a couple, even though they didn't live together. Their social media accounts were full of proof of that. Photos side by side, public declarations, family trips. There were even pictures from the trip here to Brazil, denying the relationship wasn't just a lie. It was a pretty lousy strategy, clearly meant to try to downplay the seriousness of the crime, like I said. In Argentina, homicides committed against partners in a stable relationship, even if they're not living together, receive aggravating factors that increase the sentence. The numbers also speak for themselves, okay? In 2017, they exchanged about 104,000 messages, an average of almost 300 per day. It's hard to argue that was just a casual friendship, isn't it? Nahir, she insisted for a while. She even claimed that the farewell messages posted on social media, where she actually said she would love Fernando forever, weren't written only by her. According to her, a police officer took her phone and posted it to try to incriminate her. A serious accusation, but also easy to disprove. Isn't that what technical forensics and witnesses are for? Faced with the accumulated contradictions, she backed down. She admitted the relationship, but with a new condition. Fernando was violent. Now, the version that the defense would uphold for the longest time emerged, that of a victim of abuse. Nahir stated that she suffered constant physical abuse from Fernando and that she lived in fear of him. That the bruises that appeared in photos or reports were really from abuse, not from her sport, which was hockey, as I mentioned before. And when it came to the account of the crime itself, the story turned upside down. According to this final version in court, it was Fernando who took her father's gun, which had been left there on top of a refrigerator in the house. He allegedly forced her to get on the motorcycle, and during the ride, in a moment of extreme jealousy, he supposedly tried to shoot Nahir. So Nahir, in a panic, fought for her life right there and grabbed the gun. She fired 2 shots that hit Fernando, and these shots were supposedly accidental, the result of a struggle between them. She said she didn't know how to handle the pistol properly, that everything happened in a matter of seconds without intention. But given that, then, some questions came up, right? If it was an accident, why not call for help immediately? Why pick up the shell casings from the floor? Why go back home, take a shower, and sleep as if nothing had happened? When asked about these points, Nahir replied that she was nervous, confused, that she didn't think straight because of the adrenaline of the moment. The police and the forensic experts were not convinced. The ballistic reports and autopsy showed targeted shots. The first one was in the back, while the victim was either turned away or falling. The second was a point-blank chest shot, with the victim already on the ground. There were no signs of a physical struggle, no defensive scratches on Nahir, no marks of resistance on Fernando, nothing to indicate that a fight had actually taken place. Furthermore, in all the years of alleged abuse, Nahir never filed a formal complaint, not even a report to the police, nor is there any documented search for medical help. Not a single friend, not anyone, no witness who could corroborate this. So given that, the story didn't make any sense at all. She wasn't financially or emotionally dependent on Fernando. She wasn't isolated. She had an influential family and easy access to authorities. If she was really fearing for her life, if all of this was happening, she could simply tell her father, couldn't she? In other words, guys, there weren't those elements that often make a woman feel cornered. It's not like, for example, what I mentioned, financial or emotional dependence, etc. But despite all that, part of the public opinion bought into her narrative. When Nahir was taken into preventive custody, there were protests in the streets, posters asking for her freedom. On social media, thousands defended her, claiming that she was really a victim of an abusive relationship and that she only acted in self-defense. The commotion lasted for days, fueled by debates about gender violence and femicide. Reversed, that's right, folks. You have to be very careful. Sometimes, when a crime like this happens, jumping to conclusions without waiting for the investigation to be completed isn't right, is it? Meanwhile, the investigation of the case continued. Hey Sol, remember the friend who supposedly attacked Fernando at the club and took part in the assault at Nahir's house? Do you remember that? Well, she was questioned, she tried to downplay the facts, deny any excesses, and absolve herself. Despite statements from Fernando's friends confirming the assaults, Sul was not charged with any crime. A renowned forensic psychologist from Argentina evaluated Nahir. His conclusion was very straightforward. She was intelligent, capable of emotional manipulation, and knew the impact that the assault accusations would have on the narrative of the case. If she had really suffered violence, she would have reported it. She wasn't dependent on the victim, as we saw. She wasn't trapped in a cycle of fear, you know? The expert also described her as emotionally unstable in some aspects, but calculating in others. Someone who doesn't show genuine remorse, only concern about the consequences, in other words, only cares about themselves. It's not a personality that saw the crime as something distant, looking from the outside like a serious tragedy that could get her in trouble, and not as something serious in itself. Do you understand? With this set then, technical evidence, cross-examined testimonies, forensic reports, the views of specialists, psychologists, and so on. Obvious contradictions, the path to trial became inevitable. The city in Brazil. On July 3rd, 2018, Nahir Galarza, who was 19 years old at the time, sat in the defendant's seat. For the first time, the fate of that dark dawn would be officially decided based on facts, not emotions or narratives. In the courtroom, there was no more room for lies or manipulations. What mattered there were the facts, reports, testimonies, contradictions, documents, and the choices each person made that night. In July 2018, Nahir was 19 years old. As we saw, sitting there in the defendant's seat, she was no longer that tearful young woman from the first interviews, nor the symbol of debates on social media. She was a defendant for double aggravated homicide, for a trivial motive, and for using a restricted firearm. The prosecution presented a timeline supported by technical evidence. The possession of the weapon, proven to belong to her father, was taken from her house on the night of the crime. The dynamics of the shots, the first in the back, the second in the chest, at point-blank range, the total absence of help. Nahir didn't call anyone. She just left, showered, and went to sleep, leaving the shell casings at the scene. Showing a coldness to the point of thinking that she could get in trouble for this. A 5-year history, a pattern of emotional control, manipulation, obsessive surveillance, and extreme reactions. When she lost control over Fernando's life and that theory of self-defense, the accident was dismantled point by point. The judge did not find credibility in the idea that the shots were accidental during an alleged fight. He also denied the domestic violence allegations, citing the absence of any formal complaint over the years. And he did not see any elements that would justify two aimed shots with no signs of struggle or self-defense. At the end of the trial, the sentence was pronounced clearly: life imprisonment in Argentina. Although the sentence is theoretically for life, the maximum time that can actually be served is 35 years before the possibility of parole. Even so, the impact was historic. Nahir Galarza became the youngest person in the country's history to receive a life sentence for homicide. The defense, of course, reacted, claimed the sentence was excessive, insisted on the theory of an accident, and reinforced the narrative of a victim of an abusive relationship. But nothing convinced the court. However, Nahir was not sent directly to a regular penitentiary. It's a maximum security regime. Her lawyers argued that the media coverage of the case would put her at risk. So she was sent to a different type of penal unit. The place is different from what most people imagine when they think of prison, okay? There aren't locked cells all the time, but small individual houses. The inmates can move around freely there in certain areas. Of course, they can study, take part in cultural activities, talk to each other, and even keep in touch. Right? They also have access to cell phones and social media. For many observers and critics, the regime resembles more of a condominium monitored by the state than a strict punishment. It's surreal and bizarre, right? How the feelings of the family who lost a loved one are pushed aside because of this, it's not good. Over time, Nahir started to rebuild her routine. Inside there, she started a new relationship with a young man named Matias, whom she met there during a family visit. The guy was going there to see a relative and so on, who was serving time. She posted photos of her daily life, shared moments of studying, activities, and smiles. In interviews given while already serving her sentence, she spoke about the crime with a sense of detachment. You know that some people saw it as, in a way, I don't know, bizarre, disturbing, right? She says she's sad because she can't go out to parties with friends on weekends. At certain times, she even said that Fernando could have avoided all of that. It's surreal, right, guys? I mean, a completely unstable person, right? To say something outrageous like that, right? Blaming the guy. So if he had kept being my little slave, none of this would have happened. That's all she didn't say, right? But despite all this bizarre and outrageous stuff, in early June 2022, while the court was reviewing another appeal from her defense, the lawyers released a new timeline. To the international press, you thought it was over, right? This time, the narrative was radically different, since none of the others had worked so far. Now Nahir was no longer seen as the one who committed the crime. According to the lawyers, the real culprit was now her father, Marcelo. According to this version, in the early hours of December 29, 2017, Marcelo supposedly heard screams and sounds of aggression in his garage. He looked out the window, saw Nahir getting on Fernando's motorcycle, got suspicious, and followed them. There, he confronted Fernando and accused him, of assaulting his daughter. Then, the argument started and he executed the guy with a shot to the back and the chest. Afterwards, he supposedly ordered Nahir to return by a route without surveillance cameras, an order she tried to follow but failed because she was caught on camera. The defense even presented a video reconstructing the alleged events. More than that, they claimed that Nahir was a victim of a patriarchal, sexist, and misogynistic justice system. They said she preferred to remain in prison because she felt safer there than outside, afraid of her own father. When asked why this subversion only appeared 5 years after the crime, the lawyers replied that after 4 years of therapy, Nahir had finally broken a family pact of silence. She stayed silent all this time because she feared her father more than prison. The reaction from the legal community of experts was almost unanimous. The argument was considered weak, opportunistic, and without any material evidence. Criminologists and jurists pointed out that there was no physical evidence or witnesses to support the father's involvement. For many, it was just a last attempt to manipulate the justice system, the media, and public opinion, exploiting sensationalism. Thus, in November 2024, the definitive answer came. The Supreme Court of Argentina unanimously rejected the appeal and upheld the original conviction. No new investigation was opened, no review of the sentence, and of course Marcelo Galarza was not held accountable, and so the case was finally closed. And it was on that dark road with a young man dead on the asphalt in a sequence of choices that no one can imagine rewriting, that the world saw yet another story of apparent normality turn into irreversible tragedy. Apparent normality in heavy quotation marks, right? Many people saw what was happening. Nahir Galarza is not just a convict. She is an extreme example, I would say, of how prolonged emotional manipulation, the desire for absolute control, and the absence of boundaries can lead someone to cross the line from which there is no return. Fernando, guys, didn't have an appeal, not for his sentence. There was no second version of the story. There was only the end itself, definitive, silent, and with no chance of reversal. You see, right, the guy was good, right? A good person. He gave a lot of chances to this person who, according to everything that was found out, just wanted to manipulate him, right? And so, from everything that's reported, the feeling you get is that she really only cared about herself, right, guys? Everything in this story is just fear. Actually, it's a feeling of loss for her, of her privileges, right? Of her sensations, her carnal desires, nothing more than that. Fernando was just, I don't know, like her puppet there, really. When she realized he was leaving, she said, "No, don't go, he's mine, this is over." She even says, right, if you hadn't caused this, man, it's just so surreal. But I want to know your opinion here. You probably already knew about this case, right? But I brought it here in our own unusual way. Hope you enjoyed today's work. A kiss from the redhead. See you next episode.